Hello, my name is Tracy Robinson. I'm the Administrative Services Director for the City of Lafayette. And today I'd like to give you some information on Measure H, which is the sales tax measure on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. Now, in order to understand why this tax has been placed on the ballot, we first need to understand a few things about municipal budgets. Unlike most of your personal finances, government finances often come with strings attached and rules about how the money can be spent. To keep track, we segregate the money into what we refer to as buckets, and in the budget, they're called funds. Things like gas taxes need to be spent on very specific things like road maintenance. Developer impact fees are also reserved for specific uses like buying additional parkland or building certain types of infrastructure. The general fund is the bucket that the city council can spend on anything. And this is the bucket that we're going to be concentrating on today because it is the most flexible. So, where does the money for the general fund come from? The five biggest sources are property taxes, sales taxes, franchise fees, which come from cable companies and utilities, fees for service, and money from the state. Let's get into a few more details about property tax, which is our largest source of revenue. You probably already know that the city of Lafayette is an affluent community and that homes here are very expensive with a median sales price of close to $2 million. However, Lafayette gets only a small portion of those taxes. Out of the 1% countywide property tax, Lafayette receives only 6.7%. So, what does that mean? As an example, on a home that's assessed at $1 million, the annual property tax would be $10,000. Of that $10,000, Lafayette gets about $670. So while most residents may assume that that $10,000 check they write every year comes to the city, that's not the case. So where does the rest of the money go? The largest part goes to the state, who then distributes it back to the schools for education, including community colleges. Confire gets 14%, the county gets 11%, utilities like East Bay Mud and Central Sand get 3.9%, and East Bay Regional Parks gets 3.4%. Now, let's talk about sales tax, which is also one of the top three revenue sources for the city. Everyone's familiar with what a sales tax is, and in Lafayette, the rate is 8.75%. That means that for every taxable dollar spent, consumers pay an additional 8.75 cents. And out of that, how much does Lafayette get? 1 cent for every dollar. Where does the rest of that go? The state gets almost 4%, close to half. County mental health gets about 1.5%. The county also gets 1% split between their general fund and for public safety, including county hospitals and emergency medical and fire. Then there's a total of 1.25% for public transportation. That's split between BART, the Contra Costa Transit Authority, and general county transportation. Now, where does the money go? In accordance with the city's longstanding policy of the four Ps, 36% goes to the police, 26% goes to public works for potholes and maintaining the roads, 13% goes to planning, 6% goes to parks and rec, mostly for maintenance, and 20% is for general city operations. Now, what is the most important thing about a budget? It's that it's balanced. We don't want to spend more than we bring in, and Lafayette has had balanced budgets for more than 25 years. In order to properly plan our finances, we must look forward into the future to see how we think expenses will line up with revenue and make adjustments if necessary. Our current 5-year forecast looks like this. for the current level of services. Starting next fiscal year, the city will have a deficit of 10%, or about $2.4 million. If this trend continues, the city will run entirely through their reserves in about 5 years. Now, it is important to note that this forecast is only for the current base service levels and does not include any additional projects or programs. The question most commonly asked is, why did this happen? There are a number of reasons. The first is that the cost to maintain our 92 miles of public roads in good condition has increased $1 million a year. This counts for about 1/2 of the deficit. This is due to various factors, the main one being a 33% increase in the cost of contracted labor and materials for road paving in the past 5 years compared to only 23% increase in revenue over the same period. In addition, there's increasing cost of ancillary infrastructure such as curbs, ramps, sidewalks, pathways, flashing beacons, and stormwater retention facilities, all of which are necessary but have redirected money away from pure paving projects while adding infrastructure that requires ongoing maintenance. Next is the cost of insurance. Insurance includes general liability, property insurance, employment insurance, and workers' compensation. Over the last 5 years, the cost of these insurance products have gone up about 144%. This increase is due to a variety of factors, including nationwide losses due to weather events and wildfire, an increasing propensity for litigation and large jury awards. And while Lafayette has not had any major losses or large jury awards, these factors are driving the insurance industry as a whole towards higher premiums. Next, the state continues to mandate programs and policies onto cities, but without providing additional local revenue. A good example of this is stormwater pollution. The State Water Board increases the requirements for compliance with clean water regulations without giving cities the revenue to complete these tasks. So these funds must be filled in with general fund money. Over the last 10 years, costs related to these services have increased by 78%, and as a result, the current gap is about $300,000 per year. Another example is the staff, time, and resources necessary to implement affordable housing requirements. In addition to the $215,000 annually set aside to assist with affordable housing projects, 60 programs were submitted to the California Department of Housing in order to get the city's required housing plan approved. Implementation of these programs will require at least one full-time employee for the next few years. Next is maintenance. For many years, it has been the city's practice to set aside small sums of money every year into a sinking fund to accrue funds for large capital expenses that we know will incur in the future. These include things like ball field rehabilitation, city vehicle replacements, community center roof repair, playground equipment, and capital maintenance for the library building. However, as the city's grown and acquired assets, and as inflation has increased, these amounts are not sufficient, not only for the current inventory, but there is no money for future projects. Further, general inflation has taken a toll, and just like you are paying more for gas and groceries, the city is not immune to overall higher costs. In a recent survey, 93% of residents polled indicated that they were satisfied with city services in Lafayette. Residents expressed the following as service priorities: road maintenance, wildfire preparedness, police services, traffic safety, and senior and youth programs. It's also important to understand that this deficit is structural, meaning that it is due to ongoing baseline costs that are outpacing revenue. This deficit is not due to spending money on any one particular project, either in the past or in the future. The 5-year model shows the deficit is based on current programs that keep the city services at their current level. For example, maintaining the number of police officers, keeping roads in good condition, continuing to keep city parks and trails clean, and funding wildfire preparedness activities. Now then, there are two ways to balance a budget. The first way is to reduce expenses, and the city's already doing this to a certain extent. We've used some of our American Rescue Plan Act money to bridge the deficit this fiscal year. We have frozen 4 positions, and the council has agreed to forego any new tasks and projects. And if the city sales tax does not pass, the city will need, through the budgeting process, to cut or perhaps even eliminate certain programs. Now, the second way to balance the budget is to increase revenue. The cities have very limited ways to raise revenue, and the most common way is through taxes, which require voter approval. Therefore, the City Council has placed Measure H on the ballot. Measure H is a 1/2 cent sales tax. This tax will be in effect for 7 years. It will include a citizens oversight committee, and as a general sales tax, it requires a 50% plus 1 majority voter approval. Now, why did city officials consider asking Lafayette voters to authorize an increase in the city's sales tax rather than another funding mechanism? There are several reasons. First, a sales tax of 1/2% would generate $2.4 million, and that is just enough to fill the current budget gap. Next, sales tax is paid by visitors who dine and shop in Lafayette, so the burden doesn't fall completely to Lafayette residents, and funds are brought into the community from people who reside outside to benefit Lafayette residents. Also, most groceries and prescription drugs are exempt from being charged sales tax. Also, it is paid a little at a time as compared to a property tax or a parcel tax, which is charged on property tax bills and due all at once twice a year. And then finally, all proceeds from the tax will stay in Lafayette. We will not have to share any of it with the state or with other jurisdictions. Lafayette currently has the lowest sales tax in the immediate region. Raising the tax 1/2 cent would still put Lafayette at less than Moraga and Orinda and equal to Pleasant Hill, Walnut Creek, and Concord. If you have any other questions or want to know more, you can visit us on the website at www.lovelafayette.org/measure-h or send an email to LafayetteListens@lovelafayette.org. Thank you for your time.